Welcome back to another chess game analysis video. Since you guys normally like when I'm showing my own games, I decided to show this game from last week's Swiss League tournament that I've played. And I'm playing with the white pieces here in this game, and I opened with D4 as always. My opponent D5. Now we go into a London system as usual because I've got quite a bit of experience and I like this opening quite a lot. Bishop f4, we have knight f6, normal development, knight f3, normal development. And here already on move 3 he surprised me with the move h6 after 5 minutes of thinking. By the way, this is a classical tournament league, time control 90 minutes for each player, plus 30 minutes time control. So already on the third move he thought for 5 minutes and he came up with h6. And I think it's a little bit passive, but maybe there's an idea of creating an escape path for the light square bishop before developing the light square bishop. It's not that terrible according to the engine. We have e3, you need to play your triangle in the London. So he develops his bishop quite naturally. We have c3, creating the London triangle. And already here he plays knight c6, which I don't really like because it blocks the c-pawn. I think knight bd7 would have been a much more natural development move, but it's still playable. It's just a little bit strange to place your knight there, but the game is not lost in this position. It's just a little bit strange because maybe he was afraid. The knight is a little bit misplaced because it blocks the c-pawn, and you see with the arrows the knight can easily be overloaded. So if you're not careful, bishop and queen are gonna come to the light squares and create a very nasty pin, and the knight can also overpower the black knight. So the knight is a little bit misplaced there, so you need to be careful. In order, I think he had a little bit too much respect for that plan that I'm showing you now. So he moved his bishop back in this position, bishop d7, defending the knight, and well, it's a little bit passive here, definitely. The engine already gives plus 1.5, so you're basically up 1.5 pawns just because you're more active, better developed. But somehow I think this would still be playable if you play, I don't know if you want a castle kingside or queenside here as black. It's very strange, and white still has both options. But as you're gonna see, I don't need to castle yet. I just first develop with bishop d3. Well, now I can't with castle, but with bishop d3 and queen c2 you can prepare both castles. So depending on what black does, you have a lot of options. So this is a very nice square, by the way. Since he moved away his bishop, this square is no longer controlled, so now I have my bishop on this very nice square. White is definitely better here. We have e6, a normal move, and now the knight goes in there. A normal London system move knight e5, creating a very nicely placed knight there on e5. And now, sooner or later, black has to deal with this knight in some way. He decided to remove it and to get rid of his little bit strangely placed knight on c6. So now you have both options. You can take with the bishop, which would lead to a bishop being there on e5, which is alright, but I don't really think there is much advantage here for white. I think this is just a very symmetrical position, and black can consolidate at some point. I didn't want to do this. I thought the more aggressive way to treat the position is to take with the d pawn, since the knight doesn't really have a lot of good squares. This square is taken. The queen very nicely controls these light squares, so the knight can't jump there. A very nasty position for the knight. The knight, according to the engine, best move would be knight g8, with the idea of bringing the knight over to e7, but it's still very passive, and after castles you see white is definitely better in this position. The doubled pawn on the e-file gives white more space, even though a double pawn is normally not that great, but here in this position it's actually alright. It doesn't hurt white's position too much. So this would have been the way to treat the position according to the engine, and I didn't calculate too much. I thought, in retrospect, this would have been the best plan, but I also agreed while playing with knight h7 what he did in the game. Idea is to go to g5 with the knight, which would still be a little bit strangely placed knight, but it would still be better than on h7. So I played h4, grabbing more space on the king side and taking away the g5 square from the knight. So a little bit of space. And now basically you decided that you're gonna remove the queen and then castle long, because with h4 played, you're not gonna kingside castle anytime soon. He developed a normal move, bishop e7, and now there is this idea you could create this battery with bishop and queen to target the knight. But the engine, interestingly enough, says that after knight f8, with the idea to bring the knight over here, or even over here, black actually consolidates. And even though this is so passive, it somehow works. Black is not much worse in this position, even though as a human being you still might prefer to play with white. But after long thinking, I saw this maneuver and I thought after everything is said and done, I can't really break through. So I brought the queen over to g4 instead. It's just a more concrete way to play, I think, and it attacks this very weak pawn on g7, and there is not a lot that you can do here. White is already much better here because of the activity of the pieces. So this again induces weaknesses. So the best move according to the engine, but it's just silly. It's this bishop f8 defending the pawn, but you just developed your bishop. So I think this, for a human being to move your bishop and then move it back again the next move just to defend the pawn, it looks a little bit silly. Just to show you that some moves are no longer possible after this queen g4 idea. You can't castle anymore. Because bishop takes h6 and you're going to lose a pawn and the exchange in order not to get checkmated. Also something like, in this position, also something like g6 is not a good move because it just blunders the h-pawn. So a very tricky position. I think he came up in the game with a move that I expected, but I just thought it makes things more complicated for white. So from a technical perspective, maybe this is a good try. He played g5, and now he attacks this bishop, and maybe the rook can come over here and align itself with the queen. Maybe there are some tricks, and I calculated quite long and hard of what happens after bishop takes h7, removing this knight. But now he has two options. He can take here, he can take here. I think the best try would probably take the bishop, but after queen g7 attacking the rook has to move. You can take this f pawn and you're a little bit more active, and white is up a pawn and better, but I just thought there isn't enough for me here. This is a little bit strange to play, because at some point he may long castle and then he's gone and I don't have an attack anymore, and I wanted to win this game in the attack. I didn't want to trade down, so I think this could have been played, but yes, for me it was also too complicated in the end to calculate everything fully through. So I decided to go with the more simple approach. I just took the pawn with the h-pawn, opening the h-file. I didn't want to spend too much time calculating here and saving my time for later in the game if I needed it. He took with the knight, and now the engine doesn't really like that I took with the bishop. I think it's a very concrete way of playing, and you're gonna see in a second why I think this was a good approach, but the engine doesn't like it. The engine wants to play, but from a human perspective, this is such a strange move. Bishop g2, c2 back. I'm not sure why the bishop is better here. The engine says +4, but very strange move, I think. And it's not in my play style to play like this, retreating the bishop one square. The engine also says castles, which looks a little bit better for me. Since the black king is still in trouble, and at least you bring your rook on the half-open d-file. This looks already much more pleasant for white, but I decided to take this bishop, to take the knight with the bishop, and after the bishop retakes, quick fact, you can never really take with the h-pawn. I always had problems in the game calculating what happens if three pieces actually defend, but actually one of them doesn't even defend. So black can take this, and therefore now removing the bishop from there. Bishop e7. Now the bishop again on the very passive position. The bishop pair here, a little bit, yeah, it protects the king quite well, but this bishop is not a good bishop. And so now you see my idea why I actually wanted to remove here in this position. I wanted to remove the knight so that the queen can actually enter the game. And she does that by going to g7. Now the rook is attacked, rook f8. And now basically just settling for winning a pawn. So I wanted to win the game in the attack and not trade into an endgame. So I still wanted to open files and try to win here in the attack. But after everything's said and done, black still has a passive position, and at least I won a pawn, which is okay. And now there are some ideas like c6, and after castles you could remove yourself from a very nasty pin. So you always have to kind of look that the pieces defend each other here, and the king at some point can castle queenside. You're just down a pawn. Maybe this would have been the best try. This is an engine line, of course. I think when you're so cluttered, it's much more natural what my opponent did. He removed the bishop and making an escape square for his king on d7, which I thought was actually a better attempt. Maybe c6, if you really calculate everything through, it's better. But I understood what my opponent was trying to do. I think this was a logical move from my perspective, even though now the black king is again being attacked. Now, as I said, I wanted to win in the attack, so f5, opening more files towards the king, even sacrificing a pawn. If you take the pawn, we have bishop takes f5, and the knight can come into the game. The bishop is very active here, not allowing the black king to castle queenside. Very nasty position. This rook is never coming into the game. So f5, I think a very good move here in this position. Trying not to waste too much time, but actually playing actively. I think this is what I always had to remind myself in the game. Play actively, open lines, try to checkmate. And now he played king d7. So now you could try to trap the bishop here with f6, but the bishop can actually escape. Bishop c5, knight b3, and bishop takes e3. So this bishop in this position, I actually want to trap it. And so I played knight b3, taking away the c5 square from the bishop. And now the threat is to trap the bishop, which has no squares left. So he played an in-between move, rook g8, queen takes f7, and now he basically there is still a threat of trapping the bishop. There is also a threat of taking here. So he took the pawn, rook takes g2, but now there is a forced checkmate. Queen takes e6, and in this position, my opponent resigned the game. For everyone that's not seeing the checkmate, I'm going to show it quickly. King e8, rook h8 check, rook blocks, and rook takes g8 checkmate. A very instructive game for me when it comes to attacking chess. Opening lines, trying to attack, not letting your opponent castle, and not letting him away with anything. I think for me this is, if you see my king still hasn't castled, and these pieces didn't really participate. Sometimes it's only two pieces that you really need to in order to launch an attack successfully. So I think this was very instructive. I hope that you liked this game. Give me suggestions on what you want to see in the comments down below. Maybe you want to see a very nice opening variation, or you want to see one of your own games analyzed. You can send me your own games if you want to, and I'm going to analyze them on stream or in a YouTube video. I hope you liked this video. See you next time. Bye.